Kit Ord, Crop Consultants. May I endorse the comments of my friend over there? I spent many years modelling life cycle costs for PFI in the UK, and there you're talking about 25 as an almost minimum figure. One little story, if you like. I did speak to the chief finance officer of a master developer about 3 years ago. And when I asked him how long he expected his tower blocks to last, he said, well, around here it's about 35 years, isn't it? So we've got that sort of education to overcome before we can start thinking about really making headway with a sensible life cycle model period. Incidentally, I can let you have one. My other concern is about these service level agreements. If MEFMA is going to be offering these minimum service level agreements, is MEFMA taking liability if things go wrong when they are followed?
See, I mean, this report is basically, this report is going to be going to RERA, and RERA is actually going to be submitting this report to the OA recommendations, right?
Okay, so will RERA take liability?
RERA always taking liability.
Okay. Now, my other point about the service level agreements is that the input-based specifications that you're proposing here around the rest of the world anyway are well out of date. And the move now is to move to output-based specifications where the contractors take the risk themselves and removes the risk from the owners' association. So should we not be looking at output-based specifications as a minimum for these services?
Sure, that's a good question, Kit. As we know, contracts here aren't like in the West or aren't as developed. There's still a lot of education to do there, and that's why we keep saying these are recommendation levels. The owners' associations have still got some homework to do there with the asset list that comes across, the recommendations of the manufacturers as well. So, these are descriptive, performance-based agreements. If a FM company or a service provider comes in and wants to do an output-based contract and wear some of that risk, then by all means, as I said, these are recommendations. They're not the benchmark.
It is not just SLAs are set by MEFMA. There is involvement from all stakeholders. So no one can share liabilities, even if it is an output-based SLAs. I don't think it's a one person or one part responsibility like the service provider. It's a shared responsibility.
Output-based specifications transfer risk to the service provider. That is the whole function of them. And they are being implemented in this region. And that's why going back and embedding an input-based specification gives me cause for concern. Equally...
let me interrupt you here. I think this is a valid observation, and finally, SLAs is about output. SLAs is about defining outputs rather than putting in inputs in there. If you actually go through the SLA program which has been put in place, you will realize most of it is output-based. And if you run through that complete 20-page document which is in there, it is an output-based document.
That's fine, but as long it will not therefore talk about frequencies.
Yeah, you're right. What we have done here, if you actually go to see, if you actually create an output-based document only without merging it with an input one, you're catering to a market who doesn't necessarily has matured to an effect to work on an output base without understanding what the inputs are going to be.
Then I would suggest even more. It's the reason for us to move towards output spec now. It's quite clear that the document that you have produced will be used as the specification. I know you say minimum all through it, but that will be adopted as minimum, as normal, because that owners association will perceive that that is the cheapest solution. So let's not kid ourselves. It's not going to be a minimum document. It's going to be the document.
Okay.
And if it's output,
Yeah.
then the owners association have the opportunity to say, we are not comfortable yet with that. We will put some inputs into it. That's fair comment. But I think we're going at this the wrong way and bringing old methodology into place where we should be looking at current international best practice.
Yeah, I think, Peter, this is a valid input, and maybe we could be discussing this within once more to ensure that here is a document which is defining output. At the same time, it integrates and merges with the market which we are talking about. In case you create a document which, when it goes to the service providers and they are not able to understand what is supposed to be inputted in there, then we have a problem there. And that's where we are talking about minimum service levels. It's important that we come up with a document which is understandable to the market as well. We get to a point that it has to be output driven, yeah? But in case we come up with, instead of this 20-pager, if we come up with a 2-pager, which is, clearly output driven and doesn't make the service provider understand how it's going to achieve it, there's a problem in there.
I think too, also, Dilip, it needs to be a mixture. I mean, I've taken over from other providers where it's been a purely output-based contract, and because the owners association manager isn't aware of things like frequencies or tasks with individual assets, you inherit filters that you've got to throw out that can't be maintained anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So
True.
I think it's got to be a mixture. I mean, we're dealing with owners associations here that aren't aware of the assets, the frequency, and the tasks that are underway. So I think it's got to be a mixture. But it's open for comment, so
I look forward to talking to you about it.
Sinead?
Hi, my name is Ahmed Himo. I'm from Khidma. I just had a question. Did you ever assess whether adding the new areas to the total areas would actually maybe eliminate the cost impact on the owners? Because now the total serviced area of his unit, for example, is growing, so you'd expect to get more a service charge. But when you divide the total budget cost over a bigger area, you'd actually reduce the service charge. Did you ever assess whether by adding these new areas would actually eliminate the effect of increasing the service charge cost to the owner?
Look, I think the key thing to consider here, it's actually ownership of an asset. So sure, they're paying service charges on it, but they're also getting the asset value out of that asset. So, I mean, that's the law has been determined that if it's allocated to them, they must pay for it. And it's unfair in a situation if you've got car spaces and someone's got 2 and I've got 1, that I've got to pay for that person who has the 2. So it's just sharing the liability of what they own. So, and it's the asset value what it's all about. So they're the ones that have the real benefit.
I didn't think the question I was asking, basically, if you have a total area that didn't include these balconies and parking spaces, and now by adding these balconies and parking spaces, the total area has increased. So your total cost, when it's divided by this total area, should reduce the service charge fee. So would that eliminate itself by the fact that the service charge will drop now because the total area has increased?
Yeah, I see what you get. Yes, that's true. That could happen.
Emma has just had that experience with realising that the service charge levels per square foot, when they include the the non-air conditioned areas, it actually does bring a reduction. Depends on the survey.
Yeah, percentage, but not amount. Yeah.
But this is a feedback to be provided to RERA, that in case you're including open spaces in there as part of your service charge calculation, it actually may dilute the whole budget, So
Yes.
it's an input to be given to RERA. So good question there.